Welcome back to the First Team. I'm Joe DeLeone. With me is NFL draft analyst Ryan Roberts for A to Z Sports. Today, we're breaking down the film for the Texas versus Michigan game, talking about guys that stood out and had great performances. Ryan, I would be remiss if we didn't take the chance to talk a little bit about Quinn Ewers, because I think that he was one of the biggest standouts. Obvious reasons, he's a quarterback, but I saw a step forward for him. I really felt like the hesitation and the shaky decisions were not completely removed, but right. I feel like we're starting to see a different version of Quinn Ewers, one that's worthy of what he received from some in the preseason as a possible first rounder. Definitely like a more than Connor Weigman so far, but the way that he played against a pretty strong secondary, a defensive line that was at times getting after him, there were a lot of flashes. We're reminded why he was the number one overall recruit in his class.
I mean, it was the best game I've ever seen of him play. That even includes was it Alabama 2 years ago, right? Where he kind of was like his game that people joked about and was like, well, where's that kid every single week? I think it was Dane Brugler who said something like, the flash has always been there, talent had been there, but the game kind of seems to be slowing down for him a little bit. And I agree. I think that the game is slowing down for him for sure. I know it's his third year at Texas, fourth year overall. But when we remember that the kid graduated early and reclassified and all that type of stuff, we still do need to be cognizant this is still only a 21-year-old kid. So there's a lot of growth that needs to happen. I thought that he was very confident in his own skin. There's still like some things where I'm like, hey man, let's play in structure a little bit more. But like some of the throws that he can make when off platform and just kind of being a little bit of a loose cannon, for the lack of a better term, I do think that there was a lot of positives to take from Quinn Ewers in this game.
The throws that he had in the red zone, there were a couple that he had that I forget if one of them got called back or not, but there were a number of balls that he just had where he was just moving and slinging it. There was no base that he had. The one play that I'm thinking of is when he hit Gunnar Helm, who I plan to bring up in a second.
I highlighted that play yesterday on Twitter. I mean, literally, it wasn't very good.
His chest was parallel with the line of scrimmage. He was like completely wide open, and he just whipped it into a pretty tight gap.
There were 2 to 3 defenders that were in his face, and he stepped up in the pocket and he threw this ball, on the run with no platform to Gunnar Helm, the tight end, in the back of the end zone, like that. And he made it look very easy, Joe, because like that was the thing about Quinn Ewers, or has been the thing about Quinn Ewers, is that working against chaos sometimes did not look pretty at all, right? But he looked a lot more just in control in this game, especially when kind of chaos ensued, because Michigan has a good defensive line, man. And I think that they had some good pressure at times in this football game. Like, I don't think this was one where Texas offensive line just completely dominated them, but I will say that I do think that Quinn Ewers' ability to work off script a little bit really did save them in this football game a little bit.
I want to throw out a couple guys that I think are established, and then I'll let you throw out any that you had that I thought had good performances. Kenneth Grant was an obvious one. He was immovable. You didn't think he had that great of a game?
I was underwhelmed by Kenneth Grant. I was underwhelmed.
Well, for me, I wasn't super juiced up about him. I wasn't as in on him as a first rounder as everyone else was. I had a late day 2 on him because I didn't see any pass rush upside. That showed up in this game.
I had a third round grade as well, so we're on the same wavelength. Yeah,
he's not going to really win much as a pass rusher, but I thought against the run, like, he was phenomenal. The guards and the centers were not able to move him off the ball. Trey Moore saw some really good stuff. There was one play where he completely ass planted a tackle. And Jayshon Barham is somebody who I've seen get a lot of hype. He was somebody that I had highlighted at RPM and put him down. Super long, rangy athlete. I mean, that guy can really track guys down with how big and mobile he is, but God, his eyes are just still not there. I feel like he does not totally know what he's looking at, and he's kind of guessing.
Yeah, he was. So Barham is a player, obviously, that was a transfer for Maryland, but Maryland used him at Will, they used him at Sam. They asked him to rush off the edge a lot. Like, he was just kind of all over the place at Maryland, which is, I think it was a good decision for him to transfer, because I do think that he's got potential there. I really do. I think it's more, because I felt like his eyes were in the right spot at times. I just think it was more, he hasn't been asked to do this enough in his career. Yeah. So like game 2 is just still a maturation for him. So Jayshon Barham is definitely a player to kind of keep a close eye on. I thought Mason Graham was disruptive, Joe. I just think that Texas had a good plan for Mason Graham. Like
yes.
they
took him
two
completely
blockers
out of the game.
Yeah, 2 blockers. They were chipping on him. They were doing all types of things. I mean, but he was winning one-on-ones easy. Like it wasn't even a contest. It was just when he would win a one-on-one matchup, here comes a guard, helping the center, or here comes a tackle helping the guard, like vice versa. So I just think that was a little bit of a, just wasn't it was a game plan against Mason Graham. They were trying to force other players to kind of beat them a little bit. And I was a little bit underwhelmed with Kenneth Grant, as I talked about. Jay Sean, I thought flashed. I was waiting for Trey Moore to flash, and then he hit Miles Hinton, the left tackle for Michigan, with a nice little spin move. And I was like, okay, there we are. There's a little bit something there. But, otherwise, it wasn't a crazy game for anybody else. I mean, I'm still working on the list a little bit. You know who flashed, who I did highlight in the summer a little bit, and we'll talk about Isaiah Bond, I'm sure, during this show, because Isaiah Bond, I think, is a dude, by the way. But I really like Jadon Blue, the running back for Texas, as a satellite back.
Yes.
Like I don't think he's going to be a 150 carry a year guy or type of dude, but I do think that he could be a Gio Bernard type of player in the NFL. Like his ability to make dudes miss in space and his comfort in the passing game, I think Jadon Blue has a chance to stick in the NFL for a very long time as a secondary back.
Well, and the thing with him, too, is that he was banged up in this game. And they're thin at running back right now. I have another running back I'm going to bring up. I'm going to wait until we kind of go into that bucket of young guys that we're going to talk about. But credit to him. Clearly, you could tell when he tried to come back into the game, he was having some serious trouble planting, and he just gutted it out. He didn't need to come back into the game. I know that they're short at running back, but they didn't need to call on him to keep playing because they were starting to pull away, and he gutted through it. So that's a big thing for me with a running back, especially a guy who is more finesse than he is power. He's not somebody who is win between the tackles. We need you to be tough as nails. No, this is a guy who's going to kill you in space, and he was willing to fight through that. I really liked Blue. I got one more guy that I want to bring up. Okay. I thought Andrew Makuba was awesome in this game. Not like a super flashy player in coverage, because he wasn't called upon a ton to play with range over the top because Michigan just wasn't attacking there. But he had the really nice heads-up play where the one ball was picked off by Davis Warren, which was just a really bad throw by him, but an ability to turn that into a turnover. And I thought he was, and this is why I really liked him in the preseason, why he was one of my top-rated safeties. I thought that he was super downhill and just a really strong tackler. His tackling, to me, I think, is coming to just full fruition on how stout he can be, limiting any yards after the catch.
Yeah, man, you love Andrew Makuba, dude.
I don't know why. I don't know why, man. He looked good. I can't hype up my boy. What? Like what?
I guess you can. Kind of sticking with the theme of Texas for a second defensively. Mm-hmm. One guy that I think impressed me a little bit, and one guy that I was a little bit underwhelmed based upon just things I had heard. The Ethan Burke kid, the defensive end, 91.
Yeah.
He's super active, man. Like, I don't think he's twitchy. I don't think this guy's like a top 100 player or anything, but like, I think that he's a rotational edge on the NFL level. I could definitely see that. One guy that has just had constant attention and publicity over the last couple of years as far as the high upside. I don't get it with Alfred Collins, the defensive tackle, man, like 95. I just don't understand. He was a former like high star recruit. There were people at times, and people told me that he was their most talented defensive tackle, even with, Trevonte Sweat and Byron Murphy. Like, they were still talking about Alfred Collins. I don't see it, man. I just don't. I don't think he's overly physical. I don't think he's the athlete that he's built at either. So yeah, I was very underwhelmed with Alfred Collins for what I saw in this game.
Speaking of some of these pass catchers, what did you think? You mentioned Isaiah Bond, who I had a late first, early second on him. I kind of just was expecting him to be the guy that he's already transforming into be, which is spark plug after the catch. You posted a clip of him making like a really strong, sure-handed play. But also, Gunnar Helm, what did you think of him? He had a huge game. He had 90-plus yards and a touchdown.
So here's the wide receiver breakdown for Texas for me. Isaiah Bond's not just a speed receiver. There's nuance as him as a route runner.
I really like Isaiah Bond, man. Yeah. I love him.
I mean, his first week, and again, it's early season conversations, right? So like who you're playing against is a big conversation piece. But The route running and the just silkiness out of breaks is just really nice. So this isn't just a vertically oriented player. Like, he can win with route running. But then he makes that catch down the sideline where I think it was against cover 2, it looked like, and it was a safety coming over top. His ability to win through contact and to finish that play, I thought was really tremendous. So I really loved what I saw from Isaiah Bonds. Before I get to Gunnar Helm, I would also just like 2 quick notes on wide receivers. Matthew Golden, the wide receiver that was coming from Houston. Joe, I didn't like him at Houston. I didn't. I watched his film, and they used him as a de facto gadget guy. They were just throwing screens to him. They were giving him end around.
That's not really him. Total misuse.
Yeah, I mean, like, he can do some of that stuff, but Texas is utilizing him as a receiver now, and he looked a lot better, in my opinion. Like, I might have to go. I'm actually very anxious to go back about mid-season and watch Matthew Golden, because I think I'm actually going to get a more true evaluation of him as a wide receiver, because I just don't think that Houston used him in the passing game to his most ability. So, yeah.
Before we get to Helm, to that point, that was like my biggest concern for Texas coming into this year, was like, how do you replace Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell? And they found like the 2 perfect receivers to do it. It feels like that receiving room isn't really taking a step backward. If anything, the production might be more balanced because of what we're seeing already from Golden and Bond.
And then shout out to Ryan Wingo, true freshman from St. Louis. He was like a borderline 5-star by some people. He had a 55-yard end around on one play, and he's made a couple flash plays in the passing game this past game against Alabama or Michigan as well. So shout out to Wingo as a future guy. Gunnar Helm, Joe, I thought he had nice hands. I thought he was pretty smooth. I just don't know if he's that athletic, man. Like, I don't know. Straight line was just kind of like,
I'm not asking him to be tight end 2 here. Colston Loveland had a bit of a game left to be desired with some of the stuff that he had some good plays, but just felt like a really sloppy, rough game for him. I agree with you, Gunnar Helm. I'm not calling on the guy to be an elite player, but if he's a quality tight end 2 in the NFL, I could totally see that with him. I feel like I'm starting to see a capability for him just to be an intent having blocker who's willing to get his nose a little dirty and strong hands and has a little bit after the catch. But yeah, to your point, this is not going to be a burner.
It reminded me of, do you remember Will Disley when he was coming out of Washington? That's a good
that's a good comp. That's a great comp. It's a great comp.
He's going to be in the NFL for probably 6 to 7 years. He's never going to be a tight end 1, but like, he's a part of depth, which is a good thing to have. So yeah. Do we have to talk about the Michigan offense? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I want to shout out a player that I knew the name of, but I had not watched him. So I had a friend who told me, hey, everyone's going to talk about Kelvin Banks. By the way, Kelvin Banks I thought was very good in this game for the most part.
It was almost a foregone conclusion how good he was.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this was like a stock down game for the Michigan pass rushers, Josiah Stewart, Derek Moore, but like that's another conversation.
Non-existent.
The right tackle, Cameron Williams, Joe, who is listed at 6'5", 335 pounds from Duncanville. And I'm here to tell you, there's no chance that kid's 335 pounds. That dude is 350 easy. He is a bulldozer. I do not think he's very flexible because of how big he is, but dang, bro, his paws are wild when he gets them on you. And he moves well. From like a linear perspective, laterally is okay too, but like, I just think that he's going to have a little bit of an issue on the next level as a pass protector against like the twitchier, more bendy rushers. But man, that kid is powerful, strong, and can move pretty well. So he's definitely got to keep an eye on. He's only a true junior.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts. I had another tackle on the opposite side. I liked Miles Hinton. I was very pleasantly surprised by the way that Miles Hinton played. And this is an older guy who was at Stanford and had some reps and then kind of got buried on the depth chart, and he's back into the starting lineup. And him not playing seems to have helped him. Super tall, super long. very much so a hip bender, does not have the requisite flexibility that you're really, really looking for. But I was really impressed with his upper body strength. There were a couple times where you mentioned the rep against Trey Moore where he hits the great spin move. He's not going to be flexible enough to recover against that. A couple of times where he got beat by some guys that were playing with better length and just were beating him to the edge. But the times that he was able to have a good anchor and a good base, I really saw some nice things with just the power and the ability to completely stymie any forward progression from an edge rusher. I think that Hinton's maybe a day 3 guy. I'd love to see how his season progresses. He could be an early day 3 player because of the measurables he brings to the table.
Yeah, I mean, he was a guy that I remember when he was at Stanford. For people that haven't followed his career, he was a starting offensive tackle at Stanford with Walter Rouse, and he transferred to Michigan before, not this season, the season prior. And basically, it was a red shirts, let's clean everything up year for Miles Hinton from a practice perspective. And I agree. I think that he showed a lot of nice upside to the table that he can. I think there's still definitely tools to tap into. I mean, he's 6'6", 342 pounds. He's massive. Yeah. I actually think there might be a little bit too much weight on him, but like regardless, he's big and decently athletic, and he's got length for days. So he's very interesting. He was easily. I don't think it's a hot take. He was easily Michigan's best offensive lineman.
Oh yeah, that was
close. Otherwise, it was kind of
pretty clear. Yeah,
Josh Breed was a letdown for me, man. The Northwestern transfer at left guard. I loved him 2 years ago. Last year, I thought he looked just not as athletic, and this game, I didn't think he looked athletic again. Like I don't know if it's durability stuff. I don't know if he's put too much weight on in his frame and he just can't hold it well. I don't know, but Josh Breed does not look like the same player that I saw in 2022.
Preeb was disappointing. Yeah, the whole Michigan offensive line did not have a good day, which makes sense. It's their second ever game playing together. But that was my real takeaway, was that Hinton, you could see why he was pretty highly recruited. You can kind of see why there was this attention to bring him to Michigan, and he definitely stood out as the best offensive lineman of the bunch. I had 2 young cats I wanted to get to before maybe you had anybody else. Sure. Jarrett Gibson, who is the true freshman running back for Texas. I thought that he showed some really good vision, some just really good forward lean, some really light, quick feet. I wouldn't be shocked if in 2 years him and Baxter aren't turning into like a really productive 1-2 punch if Baxter's still there. Colin Simmons, we gotta circle, man. We gotta circle that kid. That kid is.
Oh man, we have to circle the 5-star.
Okay. Seriously, come on, man. You can't ding me for bringing that kid to the table. Yeah, everybody's gonna know who Colin Simmons is pretty quickly. All I'm saying is, after 2 games, he's got the goods: the length, the bend, the burst.
Right.
He checks every box you look for an edge rusher. That kid's gonna be a monster probably next season.
He probably will be. Yeah, he for people, he was another Texas kid that Texas convinced to stay home. It was between him and LSU, and LSU, and Texas was able to keep him at home. So yeah, very talented kid, which is why his recruiting ranking was to that degree. There's no doubt. Donovan Edwards, Joe, Michigan. I thought he had some moments. I don't think it was perfect, but like I thought he had some moments.
Vision's still meh.
There was one rep, though, where I thought the vision was very good on one rep in particular, where he kind of worked front side on zone and then kind of hit the backside, and it was able to create explosive play. So I thought there were moments. I think that, again, inexperienced offensive line in front of him, no threat of a passing game right now. I mean, dude, do you think anybody is like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to play too high against Davis Warren because we're afraid to let up an explosive play. Like, no one cares about Davis Warren in this passing attack right now. Right. Unfortunately. Defensively, I think for Michigan, I already mentioned Mason Graham. We talked about Kenneth Grant. I thought that Texas did a good idea, Joe. They did not really test Will Johnson much in this game. They instead said, you know who we're going to go after? The redshirt freshman corner, number 20. Pour one out for Jair Hill. I'm sure that kid will end up being a good football player when all is said and done, but true redshirt freshman who was he was the target of the action in this game. What's his name? Jadon Blue got him in the open field too in a one-on-one situation.
Oh, I know the exact play that you're talking about.
So exactly. Poor kid, man. I know that he was a pretty decent recruit coming out of high school. I'm sure he'll be a lot better for it long term, but this was not the game for him, unfortunately. This was not the game.
Those were all the guys that I had. Did you have anybody else that popped for you?
I mentioned Ryan Wingo. I mentioned, obviously, the wide receivers, offensive line. I talked about Cameron Williams, just kind of working down the list for a second. Ethan Burke, did not like Alfred Collins. Anthony Hill, I think.
Eyes are not there, man. But the kid's long and athletic. Yeah.
He's a feast or famine kid, honestly. Like sometimes when he guesses right, he's explosive, he's physical, he's downhill, he's all those types of things. Then other times where it's just like, Hill, where what are you looking at, bro? Like I don't know if you're actually looking at anything. You know what, dude? This is going to be a hot take, and I think some people are not going to appreciate this, especially Texas fans. Okay, but you remember Baron Browning for Ohio State, Joe? And Anthony Hill is already a better linebacker than Baron Browning ever was. But eventually, when Baron Browning got drafted after playing Will, Sam, overhang, like all over the place on the second level, the Denver Broncos were like, you're an edge for us, and you're going to be a pass rusher, you're going to be explosive and powerful. I kind of wondering if Anthony Hill doesn't have that trajectory eventually. I'm not saying he can't play on the second level, but like I would love to just see him at 250 pounds and as explosive he is coming off the edge. So not saying he can't develop into that linebacker. I'm just kind of curious with his body type and his skill set, if that's not something that happens eventually.
Well, and he's been most successful when, like last year as a true freshman, where they just said, hey, pin your ears back and go. Just go be a football player.
Yeah.
I don't want to deprive him of the opportunity to learn how to read things in front of him. Like next season, he could be like a huge step forward. But right now, I'm still seeing a kid who played a lot last year, but was clearly not being asked to evaluate what was going on in front of him and really read an offense. But I will say this, if there is a current direct physical and play style comparison to Micah Parsons, it's Anthony Hill Jr. Like if there is a guy that could have that trajectory exactly, that was my whole thought with him when I was watching him. It's like, man, is he really a Will Backer? And Micah Parsons got drafted kind of like that, where they're like, oh, you're going to be an off ball linebacker for us, and we're going to use you that way.
Which he could have done. Which he could have done. By the way.
He could have done it.
Yes.
He wasn't asked to move to edge because he was bad at reading plays. It was because he was so good as an edge rusher, they decided to deploy him more as an edge rusher. I think for Anthony Hill's case, this could be the situation where he is a blend of both. He plays off ball, he plays with his, standing up at the line of scrimmage and rushing off the edge. But I think that they should rush him more because the plays that he was coming off the edge, it felt more natural. It felt like there was tangible pressure that he was creating instead of watching him run into the back of one of his defensive tackles and giving up yards that should not have been given up.
Right. Yeah, frustrating player because you see it's there talent-wise, skill set, size, profile, length, all of that type of stuff, but just curious to see how his game projects as he continues to kind of just mature physically and as a football player. Last guy, Joe, not a massive note on him because I don't have a ton, but I will say Rayshon Benny, the odd front edge, 6'4", 296 from Michigan. He had a couple plays. He actually gave Kelvin Banks his worst rep of the day where he kind of put him on his butt a little bit, or at least put it on his chest. So he might be a guy to keep an eye out who might be undervalued a little bit playing next to Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, but I do think that he had some flashes in this game. Well, I didn't have anybody else. That's everybody. We're going to close out. We're going to be back later on this week with, of all games, we're going to be breaking down the tape of the top prospects from Iowa State. We're total nutcases for watching that game a second time. Be sure to look out for that. Hit subscribe so you don't miss out. 5-star review on audio. And if you're on YouTube, drop a comment. Let us know what you thought of the game, the guys that stood out. Are you buying the Quinn Ewers hype? All of that. Let us know in the comments. We'll talk to you folks later. Enjoy the rest of your week.